Hello everybody, this is Adrian Plass here.
Yes, and Bridget. Hello.
And this is our 200th recording in the Sounding the Shallows, which is, must be 4 years.
Actually, it's not quite, is it? Because we'd need another 8 in order to make it exactly 4 years. But it is a significant number, whatever. It's a lot.
Feels like a lot, yeah.
It's interesting, though, isn't it? I mean, we do like specific numbers, particular dates, times when things began, times when they finished, and so on and so on. And actually, the fact that this is number 200 is really neither here nor there, is it? It's just another week.
Mm. Yeah, feels like a long time. But a lot of things, you realise, perhaps you realise it as you get older, I don't mind, but that a lot of things can happen that can change your life fairly significantly, for better or worse, actually, even in a very, very short time. And I have some favourite moments in literature that
Come on, then.
describe this. Well, one is a moment in Treasure Island, which is, as some people will know, by Robert Louis Stevenson. It's about pirates and people chasing them and catching them and all that.
Yeah.
So they arrive at an island, the Goodies, that is, and on the island they find a man called Ben Gunn, who has been a castaway for 3 years. And he's been put there by pirates who didn't like what he'd been doing, thought he would, and acted very usefully. So
I'm sure this is going somewhere very useful.
And Ben Gunn says to them, before very long, "May I ask you, gentlemen, whether you might have such a thing as a piece of cheese?"
Oh.
So Ben Gunn has been spending 3 years dreaming
Of cheese.
And Dr. Livesey, who is part of the group who land on the island, turns out he has a very small piece of Parmesan cheese in a snuff box around his neck. And they are thinking that probably Ben Gunn might well know where the treasure is. And so in this magical moment, Dr. Livesey takes out thing from around his neck and takes out this piece of Parmesan cheese and gives it to Ben Gunn. So for Ben Gunn, this is just heaven on earth to at last have his little piece of cheese.
How his dream come true.
His dream has come true. And actually it also leads to them discovering where the treasure is. So it's a big moment in the book.
Well, actually, I mean, when you think about it, most stories have a moment, don't they? Whether it's the secret garden, when the robin shows her where the key is to open the door into the garden. I mean, there's always moments that change things, and I suppose that's why these specific dates or particular how long something has been going on, if we're absolutely honest, those aren't the things that are of huge importance, really. I mean, it's as though our lives are made up of these tiny points, really. I think there's a type of art, isn't there? Well, I know it's an impressionist type of art.
I think it's called Pointillism.
Is it?
Made of dots.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, in a way, when we look back over 4 years, or we look back over our lives, or whatever it is, it's made up of these tiny dots, both good and bad, isn't it? These
That's
little
very
points.
true, yes, yeah. I think life is much more impressionist than anything else. That's quite true.
Well, certainly ours seems to be.
Right,
And maybe other people's
yeah.
are as well. It isn't a straight line, is it? In which,
No.
I mean, when you learn history and you start with a date and then you have another date and then another date, and certain things go into that timeline and it's all very neat. But actually, it's far more of a jumble of points.
When you think about the current situation, and it's interesting, I like the dot thing, because you have these massive things about conflict between Israel and Hamas and all the other things that are going on. But in the middle of that, you have people, adults and children, who would give the very little they have in exchange for just a morsel of food for themselves and their children. If you've got, I've never had to do it, but if you have children who are starving, and you're thinking, all I need is one little piece of food to make sure today we reach the end of the day with the children having eaten,
Yeah.
and that will be a moment, but it will be a wonderful moment.
Well, I mean, having learnt so much through things like World Vision and other charities, we know that food security, that's exactly what it means, isn't it? I remember us meeting a young man who told us that his job was selling phones. Do you remember?
That's right.
And we were quite impressed. He was an African young guy, and he'd actually come over to Scargill House, and he was talking about this job. And if you're selling phones over here, it means you're part of an organisation with a big name, and there may be pressure. But it was when he said that you get a phone, and you either sell it or you don't sell it, and that means there is a moment of despair or a moment of absolute joy when you know you can go and buy something to eat, or the day ends in total blackness.
It's very sobering, isn't it, for those of us who live in these.
Yeah.
But I was thinking also, I mean, I can't help thinking because of the news at the moment that, that the other moment they yearn for is just a moment of relief from bombs and guns and the fear of what's going to happen. And in the minds of those children and adults, pictures of people they've lost and they love.
Absolutely.
And just to have one moment that they didn't know they weren't going to have, to say I love you or whatever.
And although we can't how can we get into how that feels? We are in contact with a lot of people for whom life is pretty jolly difficult, and who keep going by little moments, don't they? Moments when they're lifted, their spirits are lifted, or yearning for a moment where maybe they get a hug, or maybe they have somebody to talk to over breakfast, or moments where everything calms in them and they feel part of something, and for a moment everything is okay.
I remember a friend of ours who said his father had never told him he loved him until on the father's deathbed he said it. And it I don't know how to describe it. It turned his life round because he'd been waiting for it for so long. And in families where there's a lot of families now where I love you is common currency, and you'd be surprised if you didn't hear it sometimes. But some of them for us are very trivial in a way. I mean, time. Of course they are. Time is as inescapably relative as it's always been. It always was. The other day we nearly ran out of petrol, didn't we? And the time.
I didn't know you were going to talk about that, darling. You do realise petrol is my responsibility.
I know it's not your fault at all. But the time when you're waiting to see if you reach a garage in time, it seems to go smaller and smaller, and or needing a toilet, or waiting for the result of medical tests. I remember some years ago when I thought I might have a brain tumour, and we were going around in a dream, and I was waiting for the phone call that would come. And I remember standing in the field. We had our other dog then, didn't we, Lucy? And there was a phone call, and someone from the surgery rang, and I knew this was it. And she said, just to let you know everything's okay. And so I went from the dreaded fear to incredible relief.
Yes,
just a moment.
But that same moment, as I said, our lives are made up of points of darkness and light. For other people, it is that moment when somebody does give them the news that they've been trying to put in the back of their minds. I remember, not for myself, but for my mum, where the doctor actually talked about the fact she had cancer. For a lot of people, that is one of those moments. So they're not to do with statistics, are they? I mean, they're very important statistics, and how long people have to wait in A&E in the UK and various other things are very important, because they sometimes trigger off reaction. But actually, we're talking real people in moments, all in moments of anxiety and panic, and you can feel things building up in you. And the idea that you talk about the peace that passes understanding, it's sometimes hard to hang on to that, because everything is swirling around you. So although we can never understand what it's like to be in Gaza or in Ukraine at the moment, or waiting and for the sound of bombs, we didn't live through a war, so we don't know what that feels like even in our country or whatever. But we can all tune in to moments that are either incredibly exciting or just the best news or the worst.
We were talking about that the other day, and I was thinking about when I was a child. In our house there was a home guard uniform. That's the uniform used by people who were drilling and training back home, if they're usually older people.
Well, your dad was a bit too old, wasn't he?
Well, he must have been in at some point, because his thingy was there. And in our pantry there was at the end of a shell, an old shell, a dead shell, and there was camp coffee, which was what people were making to. So
this really is aging us. I wonder if anybody else knows what. Just before we go on, knows what camp coffee is.
Well, it's coffee that's not coffee.
It was made of chicory, and there's a picture of some Indian person on the front of it
with a turban.
A turban, and it was utterly disgusting then. It still is. It's very good in cakes, but it was one of those interesting just reminders of war.
But the interesting thing is that I was born in 1948. The war ended in 1945, but that 3 years since the war was an eternity. When I got to the age where I could even think about that, it was no part of my life. It was no part of. I had no mechanical, mathematical way of understanding how this huge, intense, terrifying thing had suddenly stopped. And actually, you were born in the year that the war was stopped.
I was at the end of that year. Yes, I mean, it's like living in the aftermath of a storm and other people telling you about the storm and telling you how terrifying it was, but actually you're sitting in comparative sunshine with an ice cream.
That's right. We had blackout sheets in our loft. I had no idea what they were. Big sheets that you attached to the window.
My mother had something that was made from parachute silk, which was apparently very coveted. If you were able to get hold of a parachute that hadn't worked and therefore was hanging around, you could make a dress.
Oh, and did she?
She made something. She was quite good as I'm not sure. Anyway, where are we going with this? I think we've got a bit down somewhere back in the war years.
Yeah, but it's all about time, isn't it? About the contraction of time or the expansion of time, and how it looks different or whatever when you look at it from a certain point of view.
Yes, of course.
I heard something this week that I had no idea about, which is of very little interest really, but the smallest county in England is called Rutland.
I know about Rutland, Adrian, because you were very worried that Rutland disappeared for a while.
I was aghast that Rutland disappeared.
You were absolutely horrified. It was a little puzzling, but I loved it in you.
So were the people of Rutland.
Yes,
they were very annoyed indeed.
Yeah.
Anyway, it is actually a very charming county.
And it now exists again.
It does now exist again. And there is a motto which applies to Rutland, which is a Latin motto. And the three Latin words are multum in parvo, which the translation of which is very close to something we talk about quite often. It's much in little.
Oh, right. Because, what meaning that it's a really lovely area, but only small.
It's very small,
right.
But within it there are some charming places. So there we are. But I also connected that, the much in little thing, with doing these limericks I've been writing recently, where I've also been trying to get a meaning into a number of words and a number of lines that is so short and so difficult.
Because that's important, isn't it? I mean, you could just do some lines and they might be quite funny, but you've wanted to get something real. I'm not into all of them. Some of them are just funny, but you're trying to talk about something quite important, aren't you?
Yeah, I think that we've said already. The things they need are to get the rhyming right, to get the the line length right, but to have something said in it, either something funny or something that has some significance. Anyway, here's an example, just a quick example. There's one about Zacchaeus, who everybody's... Oh no, there's one, that'll do that one. There's one about Jairus' daughter, who, for those who don't know, Jesus was asked if he'd come to the house because she was sick, and on the way she died. So when Jesus got there were people outside mourning, professional mourners, so this is a limerick, good or bad. This is how it ended up. Was she sick? Was she dead? Was she sleeping? Views were determined and sweeping. Talitha cum, she lit up the room, and the mother served breakfast, still weeping.
Oh, that's lovely. That's lovely. Come on then, let's have another one.
All right, one more. And this is about Zacchaeus, the small man who hid in the tree, or sat in a tree.
I don't think he was hiding.
No, he wasn't hiding.
That fills up another whole image of him hiding in a tree. He was sitting in a tree.
He wanted to see. Anyway,
he was.
Hopefully, this says that. I hope so.
Yeah.
Zacchaeus, who perched in a place where he might catch a glimpse of the face, got the face, plus the voice, plus a half Nelson choice, climb down and be thwarted by grace.
And we've seen that, haven't we? The thwarting by grace.
Yeah.
We've seen it many, many times where somebody is just, well, I don't know whether you'd use exactly those words, but their position that they're in, just by somebody, I think we've talked about it, by somebody who understands the moment. And we had it with our dog the other day, didn't we? We'd had somebody who'd come to see you, who'd been through rather a lot, and had a whole pile up of stuff, including illness and various things. And our little dog, who isn't always the most sensitive, I have to say, actually just went and was there.
Well, she actually just walked slowly over to this person and leaned up towards the face.
Yeah.
It was just, I mean, she's a very sensitive dog. I think she just realised that something was happening.
Yeah.
And she could help. It was
and she
very
was
moving.
part of that moment as much as any of the talking or any of the counselling.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And I did think a bit about Jesus' moments, some of which we've spoken about, of course. And because they didn't have photographs there, phones then, or photographs. We don't talk about cameras anymore. Didn't have cameras.
No, not a lot, although some people might.
There were moments, and he would spot a thing, and it was then ingrained on the receptive material of his mind, and affected him, so he had to tell someone about it. And we mentioned this quite recently, the widow's mite. So he suddenly says, "Look at that woman."
Yes.
Look at that woman, and he clicks the button. And there's the picture of this woman putting
and we've
these
still got
two
it.
Tiny coins. Yeah,
Which is amazing.
It is amazing. Yeah.
I mean, I think if the Bible didn't have the moments, those, I mean, all the way through, not just in Jesus' life, but in a lot of the stories that we read about in the Old Testament and in the Acts of the Apostles, moments when something happened, like a photo, and we've still got them, because whatever we think of the Bible and however confusing it is full of moments of darkness, moments of colour, that are more important to us because they bypass all the statistics and all the timelines and all the dates and whether something really happened at that point or at that point, and the whole thing about Easter morning with all the different accounts of it, which was the right one, and they're all points that build in us really important pictures, aren't they?
They're very helpful, aren't they? I was thinking about Jesus and the centurion as well. The centurion servant was sick, and Jesus said, I'll come. And the man said, no, you don't need to come. I know when someone is in authority and they say this will happen, it happens. And obviously he'd seen in Jesus that authority was there and didn't need to come. And it's easy to read between lines, but there does seem to be a sense that Jesus thought, this is phenomenal.
Yeah.
This man is one of the few people around here who truly, truly, practically believes in me so much that he doesn't need me to go there to achieve the thing he wants most in the world at the moment. This servant who he's obviously got great feelings for.
Don't you think it's important that we allow these things to sit as moments rather than try and create a formula out of them?
Yeah.
So sometimes, you take something like that, the centurion's faith, and you could easily say this is the way we should do it. We shouldn't need proof. We shouldn't need to have hands laid. We should have enough faith. And you turn it into a formula that you are bound to fail in, really, as opposed to seeing it as a moment and thinking of all the other moments where something like that can happen for us.
I think that you're absolutely right. It's absolutely fatal to make a ministry out of some one event. But it happens over and over and over again that something succeeds and people jump on it and say, let's do this every third Friday in the month or something.
Well, we do. We really do. And something can become quite leaden then. And that moment, like you said, I love the idea, a moment like a photograph. And we still have those moments.
Yeah.
And if we can just let them all be, then I think the whole of the Bible would have so much more colour and reality in it, instead of us trying to strip it down and tidy it up and make everything go into straight lines, because it doesn't work, does it?
No, it doesn't. And we've used a couple of phrases lately that seem very relevant to this. I just thinking about it, the bit where Jesus is approached by the rich young ruler.
Again, I think we were talking about that.
That's right.
So absolutely, it's been in our heads.
The disciples say, well, who can be saved if he can't? And Jesus says, with God, anything is possible. And the thing we've said to so many people who are in the poo, in the dark and lost, there are 1,000 new beginnings. This is rather underestimating 1,000 new beginnings with God, but they're endless new beginnings, which is what is so I think truly exciting about the fact that in 2 seconds' time something can happen that will change everything, and it does. It does. Sometimes for the worse. I don't know whether that's to do with how you approach that or what it is, but in a moment there are so many possibilities. Which I find very interesting.
Oh, well, as Jesus also said, that we were told by the people on that road to Emmaus, he opened their minds. Maybe we still do need to keep opening our minds to see these dots, these moments, these tiny things that may or may not be of significance, and not turn them into something more or less than they are, but just let them sit there so we can ponder them and think about them and enjoy the good ones and allow it within ourselves as well, the good bits.
Yeah. Let God show us his photos.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Wow.
So it may seem a long time till our next time, or a short time. But whatever it is,
We'll speak to you next week.